I would pray as much for John McCain and respect his affection and love for this country as much as I do President Obama. They came from different directions, but their love for this country is undeniable, both of them. And I disagree with Senator McCain on the whole hate crime thing. But what we have today is an assault on reason and morality. And what I mean is, incivility and tactical falsehoods are becoming currency. And those are the folks who get the mic. Michael Savage, another horrendous Islamophobe. And I'm sorry, I think it's important that a person with a Jewish surname and a practicing Jew go wherever he can and decry Islamophobia. Because anti-Semitism and Islamophobia, as my friend Dr. Husainovich says, are thematically and historically linked, as is racial prejudice, homophobia, and these other prejudices that influence the mainstream. So while I'm happy to condemn the neo-Nazis at March, 21 of them showed up. How many people listened to Michael Savage's radio show where he said there should be a boycott of restaurants that hire folks because many of these folks are undocumented and there's a possible Al-Qaeda plot to spread the swine flu through undocumented people who work in restaurants and put their hands down their pants and don't wash them. You laugh, but this has currency with people who aren't as educated and morally upright as you. We have just passed the Matthew Shepard Hate Crime Act. And there have been those, when I went to put together my book, the first person I called to contribute as an editor was the most vigorous opponent I ever met on hate crime law. He was a person of goodwill. He had various reasons: judicial economy, looking at motive. There's no bigotry involved in it. I disagreed with him, but I respected his opinion. But now we had people come out and say it's going to protect pedophilia, or it's going to enable people to round up people who say hateful speech, or like Mr. Abdel Malik Ali, who said it was a plot by Jews to stop discussion on Jews, Israel, or the Holocaust, and it would cause people to get arrested, and he would break that law everywhere it acted. Look at my Huffington Post column, look at the video I put up. What the law does, just frankly, is it enables state and local authorities to get forensic and economic help in the resolution of hate crimes that are committed on the basis of such things as gender, sexual orientation, gender identity, disability, race, color, religion, or national origin. It took out the loopholes that enabled, listen to this, the attempted assassin of Vernon Jordan when he was president of the Urban League, who was shot in a hotel parking lot in Fort Wayne, Indiana, by a serial killer white supremacist, who was acquitted because the law's requirement made it such that the jury not only had to find beyond a reasonable doubt that he was shot because he was an African-American leader, but because the sniper wanted to interfere with his right to use the hotel, which the jury could not establish. That's the kind of loopholes we have. Or today when we have a young man just last week beaten around the head, bloodied in Oklahoma because he is gay. We're a nation that's better than this. That doesn't mean that we have to abandon disagreements of goodwill. However, what it does mean is that the law has an important message to send. And when there are times when the law demonstrates a lack of action, that there be a backstop for the most vulnerable and alone people in our society. I had the privilege, and I knew it, I just felt so good. I had the privilege of meeting with Attorney General Holder this summer about the cold cases. And what I said to the Attorney General, who I have such utmost admiration and affection for, is, sir, Mississippi reported 0 hate crimes last year. We can't even get them to respond to the hate crimes that are happening today, let alone the ones from 40 or 50 years ago. 35 to 40% of the hate crimes are committed against African Americans. I don't point this out because I have an agenda with one group over another. I was raised by a good mom and dad who raised me to believe that all people are part of the chain of humanity and God's children. However, when we look at the fact that 35 to 40% of hate crimes in the United States are committed against African Americans, and the states with the highest percentage of African Americans have the least reporting, and I point to Mississippi, highest percentage of African Americans, 0 hate crime. Alabama in the top 5, I think they reported 6. Georgia has over 1 million African Americans. We're talking about with at least 25% of the population. I think reported 13 hate crimes in 2007. Maryland reported 150. So we know that there are problems going on with that. The government has an obligation to rid the society not just of violence, but as the Supreme Court has said, of discrimination. And when the most violent thugs among us act violently, there is nothing wrong with the federal authorities to either come in and assist the locals if they're willing, or in the case when they're not willing, to go at it and do the right things themselves. I want to leave you with just a couple of things. You know, we're at a unique time. When the FBI comes out with hate crime stats next month, it'll probably show a decline. Although we know that unreported hate crimes are in the 6 figures, while reported hate crimes in the last few years have only been around 7,000 to 8,000. We know that there are serious gaps with hate crime reporting in the United States. I think, though, that one of the things that we have to do is look back on some of the lessons that our professor-in-chief tells us. When President Obama this spring traveled, he tactically went to 2 places. He went to Ghana and spoke about how important it was for his daughters to see the incredible inhumanity that took place on that cape. How people literally scratched for their lives as they were imprisoned, and how many, millions, were victims of the genocide of slavery. He came to do that around the same time that he also went to Buchenwald and spoke about that. And for that, I thank him. Because again, as the Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King said, he who passively accepts evil is as much involved in it as he who helps to perpetrate it. He who accepts evil without protesting against it is really cooperating with it. I encourage you to look up his speech that he made in both places, where Elie Wiesel at Buchenwald said, "Mr. President, my father has no grave. He watched his father die." He said, his grave is in the sky. There were so many who could have contributed so much to the world. How many cures for cancer did we miss? How many Maya Angelou's? How many Mikhail Baryshnikovs? How many Da Vinci's? How many Higginbothams were relegated to genocide or slavery or concentration camps? It wasn't the loss of these particular individuals that we decry. It was the loss to humanity. So in closing, what I'd like to do, because part of what I do, I hope is somewhat inspirational, although I must tell you, I learned this a long time the hard way, after being sandwiched between Representative Jim Clyburn and a preacher, an African-American preacher from Western North Carolina. I remember taking notes saying, never talk in between these folks. But one of my heroes is RFK. And here's what he said on the night of April 4th, when Martin Luther King was murdered. He said, what we need in the United States is not division. What we need in the United States is not hatred. What we need in the United States is not hatred. What we need in the United States is not violence and lawlessness, but is love and wisdom and compassion toward one another, and a feeling of justice towards those who still suffer within our community, whether they be white or whether they be black. Let us dedicate ourselves to what the Greeks wrote so many years ago, to tame the savages of man and make gentle the life.